former Secretary of State for the Arts, Home Affairs and National Heritage. That means that he was effectively in charge of the BBC. David, thank you so much for joining me. I wonder what your thoughts are on what looks like a horrible mess that seems to be getting more tangled and complicated by the minute.
Yes, I mean, I'd love to come on your show in a little noddy mode, hello birds, hello flowers. What a wonderful world we live in. But, I had 4 stabs in the 80s and early 90s at being the Minister for Broadcasting.
Yes.
And I can tell you, I have never, ever, ever been as shocked as I am by this, where, a household name broadcaster has been accused of truly awful things. I mean, really awful things. And I think this has got to be brought to an end. It's like a doctor, he looks at a boil on your neck and says, this has got to burst. Well, this boil has got to burst. And we can't go on like this. So somebody has got to take action. Either a member of Parliament's got to stand up in the House and name this person, or the BBC have got to say, we are entitled to name this man and name him. There is, when you look at how thin the judicial pronouncements are that justify this silence, I just don't think that judges can expect to paralyze the nation in a way that is happening now.
But David, I'm astounded to hear you say this is the worst scandal, or you're more horrified by this than any other BBC-related broadcasting scandal. I mean, because
I'm sure Mr. Putin has created worse scandals. Yes. I'm talking purely about broadcasting, and I'm talking about this paralysis that has taken over. At the end of the day, there is plenty of reason why this person should be named, and he can then defend himself. I'm long way having had a Sun story sold to them by Max Clifford that was a total invention published. I have no time particularly for the Sun, but what is absolutely certain is that something has got to be done urgently so that we can move on from this, and also so that there can be a satisfactory conclusion, which has to be this man's future determined, may end up in the courts, but this man's future determined, but also the BBC and journalists moving on from this. The paralysis imposed by what seemed to me, when I read, as a lawyer myself, the judicial comments that have put us in this situation, I just don't think the judges had any idea, I don't think any of us did, what a mess was about to be created. But one thing I'm certain of, if the BBC were to say tonight, enough of this, X is the man, and X is no longer going to be employed by the BBC, I don't think anyone would say to the BBC, to Tim Davie, come before the Royal Courts of Justice and be weighed off for the disgraceful thing of telling 80% of the public what 20% of the public already know.
I suppose, David, though, that there are all sorts of stays stopping the BBC. One of them is that only yesterday a statement was made through the lawyers of the first young man saying what the Sun has alleged every allegation is utter nonsense. In fact, he used the word rubbish. So it's a lawyer speaking for the young man who's meant to be at the centre of the whole thing, saying the law hasn't been broken, this story is rubbish. So surely that must be something that must be considered. Secondly, there's the question of whether this presenter is entirely innocent of breaking the law for a start, but maybe also innocent of any of this. It could be that it just isn't true. It could be that there's a feud between the young man and his parents, and somehow or other, the Sun has been used as a vehicle for this. I mean, we don't actually know how true any of this is. And if it were to turn out that this is utterly false or very much inaccurate in the way in which we gather things unfurled, if it's not true and the BBC comes out, as you say, to lance the boil and announces that it's this person, dismisses him forthwith, and then it turns out he didn't really do anything at all and he's actually been a pawn at the centre of some peculiar family feud, that would be awful and unconscionable. Also, aren't there procedures that you have to go through before you dismiss people?
But that is not a reason for silence. We don't live in a society where uncomfortable truths or allegations that may turn out to be untrue are concealed from the world. If it was indeed the case, and I hope it is, knowing and liking this man, that it's all complete invention, the damages will be enormous, and his vindication would certainly be a subject of great cheerfulness for me. But that's not the point we're at. We're at the point where there is a paralysis of the normal comment that you would expect to get on media issues, because the BBC won't act against this man. And rather astonishingly, and this is for me a very significant point, why doesn't he say, the person they're on about is me, it's a complete lot of rubbish, and here's why it's a complete lot of rubbish? Why is he skulking in a corner, hiding behind a lot of expensive lawyers?
Well, maybe he's hoping that his name will never be openly mentioned, and it will only always be covert, and nobody will ever really be able to say that it is he, and that he can somehow or other ride out the whole thing and carry on working, and it will just go away somehow.
Yeah, but it won't. You know that.
I mean, I know that, but I wonder if maybe
of it going on.
Oh, David, you've frozen on me. Oh, there you are. Go on. What did you say?
No, I said it's the chances of it going away are sub-zero. There's no way it's going to go away. The only way it will go away is if there is a resolution. There can only be a resolution by this man. You know, it would be shocking if this were to be the case, were to accept that he had done the things that were being alleged, or, as I would personally hope, he'll be able to show that this is a monstrous plot against him. But it's not going to go away. There has to be a resolution. And my view is that resolution has got to be a quick one. And, you know, if I were a judge and played any part in, you know, it used to be thought that if somebody was charged, well, of course, that was sub judice. Before that stage was reached, it was much easier to comment. The idea that somehow the legal rights of the citizen are enhanced by having a situation where, you know, somebody is allowed to remain anonymous, and from a position of anonymity, his employers are frightened to act. The government, who can't wriggle out of this, you know, they impose the BBC upon us. What are they going to do? I can't remember now who the person is who's the secretary, job I used to do, the Secretary of State for DCMS. They change quite rapidly. But I mean, that person has got to, you know, she's got to just deal with this.
David, there are
and we've got to move on.
Many factors here confound me. If I hurl them at you, maybe you'll tell me how you feel about them. One of them is that the Director General has not spoken to this person. I find that unbelievable. I mean, I believe it because he says it too.
Both.
I cannot understand that. Can you?
I can't, of course. It's ridiculous.
I mean, why has he not summoned him to his office and said, tell me, did you do it or not?
And this man has a very big job for which he's very well rewarded.
Yeah.
He's not rewarded for being paralysed.
Quite. So I'm astounded, and I don't think that it contravenes anything at all for your senior boss to ask you in a situation like this, causing maximum furore and embarrassment, to come to his office and man to man, and with or without your lawyer, to say, have you done it? Did you do it? Is this true? Isn't this true? And I'm beyond confused by this, because I would have thought it was the Director General's paramount primary duty to do that as the very first thing.
And you know what the Director General should say? And I bet if he asked us, you know, he probably got far more sensible, or probably far less sensible people than you and me to advise him. But what you would have said, I suspect, is what I would have said.
Yeah.
The BBC is being tarnished by this, and the presenter has got to be told, you've got to disclose who you are, not skulk in a room behind your lawyers. And you've got to say, this is the most outrageous thing. And indeed, it would be if it was not true. The most outrageous thing that's ever happened. I am going to deal with this, but I want it to be known that that the person they're naming is me. And what they're saying is complete and utter lies, because otherwise, what are we doing? And if the presenter thinks that he is doing himself any favors by trying to remain anonymous as the whole world is collapsing about his ears, He must be joking.
One more thing I don't understand and seems to me to be beyond anything, any kind of discerning interpretation, is how it can possibly be that the Director General of the BBC has said today the BBC is pausing its own investigation into their own primary and celebrated staff member pending the police's investigation. How can it be that these don't go in tandem? Why does one have to stop while one of them continues? Why can't they both continue?
And I think of the late, great Brendan Byrne, the Irish
Let's think of him. It's a great thought.
Who once said, "There is no situation so terrible that a policeman can't make it worse."
David Mellor, always a privilege. Thank you very much indeed. Great.